Okay, we're returning to this meeting. It's now back in session. We have the second of 3 interviews. We will be interviewing Nicholas Caccamo. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. This position, the town administrator position for the town of Adams, which I'm sure you've asked questions and as part of your tours and probably learned a few of the responsibilities of this. The town of Adams is governed by a charter and related acts. Have you read that? I was just curious. You read through that?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't need to go into too much on that. That's good. The process we're going to use this morning is that we have 10 questions.
Okay.
Each board member will ask 2 questions, one after another.
Sure.
And there's an opportunity for follow-up questions, which you'll probably receive several as we did the first candidate. I'd like to begin the introductions. I'm John Duvall. I am chair of the board. I've been on the board for 14 years, and I recently retired from General Dynamics.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm Ann Bartlett. I'm the vice chair. I have been on the select board for my 2nd year. I'm a former business owner of a restaurant for over 50 years in town. And it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hi, Nick. So Christine Hoyt, I've been serving on the select board since 2017. I'm in my 8th year. I also work at One Berkshire, which is the Regional Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development and Tourism Bureau for the county. And I serve on the MMA Board of Directors as well as the Maya Board, and currently serve as the chair of the Select Board Association for Berkshire County.
Sounds busy.
Just want to disclose all of the things.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Nick. My name's Jay Mezawar. I'm the newest elected board member down in May, so a couple months in. And I work as a physical therapist at Berkshire Sports and Physical Therapy in the North Adams campus.
Great. Good to see another beard on the panel.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Joe Novak. I'm in my 13th year as a selectman in Adams. I'm retired from the state of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Management, where I spent most of my time on Mount Greylock. And I'm also was a member of the Conservation Commission for 30 years when it was first formed. And I've lived in Adams my whole life, and giving to the community through volunteering has been something that I enjoy.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Nick.
Okay, Nick, we'll start off with, tell us about yourself, work experience, and why you are interested in this position.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for the opportunity to interview today. So when I left undergrad, I had graduated with a degree in secondary education, and I went into the field of education for, like 3 to 6 years. And during that time, never quite landed the full-time social studies teacher job that I sort of envisioned, coming out of college in the early 2000s. And if you remember the job market back then, there was a real disconnect between there was a supply of a lot of social studies teachers and demand was very low, coming out of that sort of Great Recession era. So working, through education primarily in the secondary education field, mostly in high school. During that time, I continued to develop an interest in politics and ended up running for Pittsfield City Council in 2014 and winning that election and joining the Pittsfield City Council for 8 years. It was during that time I sort of realized, and let me take a step back, but getting into legislative politics like that, I really thought that was sort of the avenue where you could really impact change at the sort of community level. And what I learned really quickly, it was the day-to-day bureaucrats that work in the planning department and the assessor's office and the accounting. That's what really sort of moves local government forward. So during my 8 years on the city council, I tried to spend as much time as I could in City Hall, sort of learning what people do, what their job responsibilities are, how they impact the community. And then I thought that was just a way for me to expand my understanding and role in the legislative experience. And through that, I quickly realized that I should make a career change. So I left teaching, I guess that would have been the summer of 2018, to pursue advanced degrees at University of Massachusetts Amherst in regional planning and public policy and administration. So I ended up being a non-traditional grad student for the course of, those 3 years. And, that's allowed me to have that sort of academic foundation to support the work of sort of town administration. So after graduating UMass Amherst in the spring of 2021, I applied for and was hired as the town administrator in the town of Williamsburg, population about 2,500, out to just next to Route 9. So I've been in that position for 5 years, continuing to learn, grow, understand that position and what makes a successful town administrator, and what sort of those, and developing those attributes, applying sort of the toolkit that I've developed over the years to this job, and helping sort of forward the vision of the select board. And at this time, so I'm just looking to further my own career growth, and that sort of comes in opportunities where larger communities are looking for town administrators, town managers. So, these jobs don't come open very often. And, when presented the opportunity, I applied and, was interviewed by the search committee and forwarded here.
All right, thank you. So as I stated before, the board will ask questions. We'll start with Ann.
Okay. Communication is a crucial part of the town administrator's role, especially in a town that has faced challenges with trust, morale, and transparency. How would you communicate with boards, committees, staff, the media, and the public? And how would you build trust to keep everyone informed and engaged, especially dealing with controversial or complex issues?
Sure, I think a lot of that can just be held under the umbrella of the very open door policy that I have now. So when I'm in the office, the door is wide open. So we always, that just means anyone is likely to walk through. And this could be someone who's attending the Tai Chi class that's meeting on Monday mornings, or the resident who's quite angry that stormwater didn't drain, appropriately. And that goes the same for boards and committees. We in this office, in the administrator's office, we can supply a lot of information, be professional support, and sort of assist those in moving their goals and priorities forward. Typically I think that comes a lot of times in the form of like grant administration, just working through the various programs that the Commonwealth offers. And within that open door policy, it's very clear, like I often will drop what I'm doing to deal with those conversations, to have those conversations, make sure people are heard, try to be respectful, answer, and provide the information that they're requesting. And if I don't have it, we try to make a future appointment to, I'll say, oh, I think I can get it here, here, or there, and depending on like filing systems and so forth. But that's also something, you're going to earn that trust over time. So I can, imagine that it's going to be applying that concept going forward over months and years, I think builds that trust, builds that understanding. And, I come to a position where, I believe I maintain myself a high ethical standard in doing this and being transparent and being accurate in the information.
Okay. Any comments from anybody? No? Okay. The next question would be, reflecting on your research, what do you consider to be the key opportunities and challenges facing the town of Adams? How would you begin to address these challenges as the TA? And how will you handle public engagement on unpopular issues and decisions?
Yeah, so a lot of my research for the town of Adams sort of revolved around the survey of the town's website. So when I go into that town website, there's primary documents I look for. Quickly we look for sort of budget documents associated with town meeting to, we always understand that to be the town's premier policy document, and what you choose to present to town meeting for funding, I think really embodies, where you want the community to go forward. After we're looking through budgets, I typically jump to the community development or the planning board side of things. To me, I think the most important document that a community could have is an up-to-date, active, comprehensive plan. So I didn't see one, but when I was here on Wednesday, it was conveyed to me that there was a comprehensive plan for the town of Adams, and it may be in the ballpark of like 20 years old. So those serve as, I think, the premier opportunity for a community to gather that public input about where the community wants, where it is, what are the strengths, challenges, opportunities, and weaknesses, identifying those existing conditions, and then think about the themes and, how the community wants to be in 10 years and what that looks like. So I think those reports offer an opportunity to engage town employees with their expertise, the public and sort of where they want things to go. And then over the course of 12, 18 months, you do those reports, you come back with a recommendations matrix, and now everyone is kind of working towards implementing those goals based on their priorities. And I think that can be a really helpful tool in sort of keeping everyone rowing in the same direction, feeling like they're contributing to the larger sort of collective quality of life.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up, I'm not sure if you responded, it might be me not listening well, and how will you handle public engagement on unpopular issues and decisions?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we deal with members of the public who come in and they're pretty upset with something, whether that's like a very specific, pothole not being filled in a timely manner or something larger, it's helpful, to make sure they're heard, listen. We often have to serve as a sounding board before we can jump into sort of solutions and possibilities. But, we can take that, and then after that initial sort of explanation of what they're feeling, then you can break out the sort of like, well, what is the problem? What can we use to address that? And like, how can we make this right? How can we make that correct? But it takes time, right? It's like, 9 times out of 10, it's just being heard. It's saying, these are the tools that the town has to sort of address those things, and, and trying to encourage them to be, positive in their solution or in their thinking, and sort of getting to the goal and getting to yes in some scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm next on the agenda here. So, question 3, I have question 3 and 4. So, question 3 reads as follows. Please share a specific example of success you've had in economic development, and what lessons did you learn from any setbacks or failures?
So when you say economic development, are you thinking of the sort of the holistic approach, or are you thinking like economic growth, like literally number of jobs?
Well, I didn't make that question, so
Yeah.
I usually like to make my own questions, but this was different this year, so the
Sure.
question makers, perhaps they can,
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, just in general,
Yeah.
you can answer either way or both.
Yeah, sure. So I think if the community's goal is economic growth, that's literally number of jobs, that's one thing. And I think the totality of economic development is sort of more of a collective part of things. It's access to open space, it's quality of life issues, it's the administration of public resources to public goods. And I think those things can be a little bit different. So the question was define success in those things. And how would I I think for any community, when you're looking at goals of economic development or economic growth, it starts primarily with your zoning ordinance and your zoning bylaw. So if you're not entirely confident with your zoning districts, what's allowable by right, special permit, et cetera, I think it becomes kind of hard to focus efforts on economic development if those things aren't really clear and well reviewed. So, and this is, again, the opportunity of the comprehensive plan. So you develop those issues and you think, what can we do to tinker with zoning that makes sense, that promotes economic development, promotes economic growth in a way that feels good to the community? Because it's not just a question of, I think, looking necessarily for more commercial tax revenue in the form of box stores and parking lots, but maybe taking a more sort of on-the-ground approach. So Adams offers a very interesting downtown corridor where, sort of newer forms of zoning, like form-based, can be really effective, where you focus on the built environment, pedestrian focus, and then use that as sort of the growth mechanism. And then there are certainly tools and opportunities you can use to promote economic development. So most often in the city of Pittsfield, you would see tax incremental financing to developers, especially if they were large vacant buildings where they just needed a little bit extra to make the project work. And those can be very helpful. The reduction of parking minimums or just outright elimination of those things, reduces costs on development. But again, you want to be framing that in line with where the community's vision is. Your question is about specifics, and I don't know that there's any specific thing over the course of my time. When I'm on the city council, I'm part of an 11-person, city council, and a lot of those economic development initiatives in Pittsfield were centered around often tax incremental financing. They had a large economic development fund where they would promote business who, had these ideas, and they say, if you can bring X number of employees in, we'll kind of offset those things. And, presently in the town of Williamsburg, it's 2,500 people. It's been steady at that number for near 100 years. And, they're a primary residential community. So it doesn't have like the sort of the space to build out sort of that development. And there are some limitations. So like actual specifics, I can't say I could account for X number of jobs. And
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And since I'll read the second part of it because it's hard to comprehend that after speaking. So the second part of question 3 was, what lessons did you learn from any setbacks or failures? So
setback, yeah.
or failures.
I think with economic development, the setbacks and failures come from, how can I put this right? So without sort of reiterating the first part, sort of that attention to zoning, I think the potential missteps there are that if your zoning bylaw doesn't quite address specifically what the community is looking for, you're going to be subject to the market. So if they come in and there's development, and particularly when you're bordering other zoning districts like the residential commercial bump ups, those can be pretty problematic. So if you haven't really like fully thought through those elements, it's really the unintended consequences of just sort of promoting all sort of quote economic development in whatever shape and form, if it's just like a matter of trying to increase tax revenue. So I think, being really careful there is usually what happens when, okay, yeah, a new company wants to move in, that's great, but if you don't really fully think through the ripples there, then it has some problems down the line you have to address.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And the fourth question.
I have a follow-up, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, Nick, without, sharing what you can't share publicly, because it's still ongoing, I'm going to ask you about a specific business recruitment and opening that's happening in Williamsburg. So with Element A Brewery moving from Framingham to Williamsburg, it was seen really as a win for Williamsburg, but also a win for Western Massachusetts.
Sure.
I know it's not open yet, but can you talk about that recruitment from having an established business from the eastern part of the state moving to the western part of the state, and anything that Williamsburg has done to maybe help with that business opening or moving there?
Yeah, so we lack any sort of like Chamber of Commerce type of thing. And that particular space, which was the Bergie Brews location for a number of years, is restaurant space, and there's a brewery capacity sort of on the annex of it. The town didn't actually do any sort of direct outreach to, is it Element A?
It's Element A, yeah.
Or no, Exhibit A.
Oh, Exhibit A, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Element is a different brewery. You're right.
That's correct, yeah.
Route 2.
So in Exhibit A, if you're not familiar, they're out. I think it's Framingham.
It's Framingham.
Area. So they had this very long post about moving locations to Williamsburg, and this space had been vacant for some time with the closure of the Bergie Brews location, and I think that's an example of it's a very nice community, right? So if you go to that location, there's lots of perennial flowers planted. There's a nice curve in Route 9. There's plenty of on-street parking. There's other businesses. So I think if they were looking to move, so they weren't courted by the town to say, like, come to this location. They sort of made that choice. And then since that post, they've kind of been radio silent. So what's going on there now is sort of brewing for distribution through that sort of LLC, I think. And this, correct me if I'm wrong. So the town did reach out and they said, you know, we welcome the new owner. We said, if you need anything, you know, please come by town offices. You know, we can help with licensing, any questions, concerns. And that was received, but they've never acted on it. They've never, so the doors remain closed, and it's not entirely sure, like, they haven't communicated what their vision and model is. So I think it's changed internally, but they haven't come to the town for any sort of resources or further future support on that. But, you know, what we do offer is, you know, public services that are, you know, for a small town, very timely, very efficient. And, you know, there's a nice, you know, downtown corridor that sort of makes the outdoor seating attractive. You know, there's good pass-through travel, you know, between Route 9, you know, particularly Pittsfield and Northampton, that sort of, I think, makes that a viable option for them. But yeah, we did not have any sort of direct outreach as like, come to this location. We weren't courting other breweries. It was, I think the stars kind of aligned, but, you know, whatever's happening back, you know, internally we're not privy to those discussions.
Thanks.
The town administrator of Williamsburg, which is currently the position you hold, has, which I would call a weak town administrator type position.
Right.
I was wondering if you could just, I was trying to, you know, when you're responding to these questions, you're, you know, looking for more specifics and working with your department heads, but those are things you don't do. Could you just go over your responsibilities as a town administrator in Williamsburg, which compared to this position, you run the day-to-day, you're
Correct.
responsible.
Yeah. So no, it's very different. So in Williamsburg, it's a three-member select board, and it's a general law select board. So we kind of file everything through them, and they're quite hands-on, and they like to be sort of the decision makers. And, you know, I attend all of those meetings. I try to support their goals and priorities. You know, they often will sort of direct me to certain projects or to communicate certain things. But they also rely on me to sort of keep them informed on sort of the day-to-day, what's going on. We do a lot to try to like support departments when they need things. You know, resources run dry towards, you know, March, April, but you need new tires for the fire truck, kind of thing like that. But so they're very hands-on. And, you know, when you look at the organizational chart in Williamsburg, it's really sort of a line across. So thinking of like highway superintendent, fire chief, police chief, town administrator, you know, it's often department heads or in departments of one, but we're all kind of on that same line.
And everyone reports to the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
right?
Yeah, they're the managerial sort of, you know, they're the managerial part of it. Yes, but at the end of the day, they all report to the board, you know, who does the hiring and choosing.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but it doesn't preclude me from sort of making my way around town offices, checking in, making sure people like feel good at what they're doing, and being aware of, you know, what deadlines and things are coming up. And if anything goes sideways, it's probably going to end up, you know, on my desk.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna read on number 4. I would suggest you probably get your pen as I read it, because there's 3 separate
Sure.
questions in with
Okay.
the context of this. And I'll read it twice and let you digest it. So it goes as follows. How would you approach building a responsible, transparent budget that balances infrastructure's needs with taxpayer concerns, given the timing of this hire and the fast approaching fiscal year 27 budget? That's one of the 3 questions. The second is as follows. What would your priorities be, and how would you communicate recommendations to the Select Board and Finance Committee? That's question 2. And lastly, how would you approach a budget deficit? So I'm going to reread it in whole. How would you approach building a responsible, transparent budget that balances infrastructure needs with taxpayer concerns, given the timing of this hire and the fast approaching fiscal year 27 budget? What would your priorities be, and how would you communicate recommendations to the Select Board and Finance Committee? How would you approach a budget deficit?
Okay, yeah. So I think the timing is a pretty interesting question, and I think what the correct answer, the answer that comes most notably to mind is a lot of the first year of these positions are sort of maintaining the status quo. I think a lot of it is sort of understanding the patterns and rhythms that the Adams government operations might be. So, so we're at the end of October. It's likely you're starting your budgets. I mean, I think it's, the select board needs a budget from the town administrator 90 days before, town meeting in June. So I think coming in, if appointed to a position like that, it's going to look pretty close to what you're looking at in fiscal 26. I don't think there's enough time to really sort of understand everything correctly and bring forward something that is wildly different or unusual. I think it would really be sort of status quo, incorporating the usual cost constraints. You're going to see increases in health insurance, I'm sure, in fiscal 27. Utilities don't get any cheaper. Contractual employment raises have to be incorporated. So that's all going to take a big chunk of sort of what that 2.5 new growth is, fiscal year over year. In that time, so at the same time, you sort of have to be monitoring sort of the capital needs. So you have to be getting into these buildings, engaging with department heads on a very granular level to see what are your needs, what are your goals and priorities, how does the town function, with respect to utilities, right? Do you have a very active energy committee that wants to see the decarbonization of the town? Is that a goal and priority of the select board? So I think these are all things that take time and to understand, and that happens in the first year. It happens in those conversations. It happens with the open door, people kind of coming in, sharing their experiences, wanting to contribute certain elements of things, and then dealing with the budget deficit. So it looks like you have at least 2 projects, potentially a third, that are debt excluded. So increasing your maximum allowable levy, I think that's a great tool to sort of, build in that capacity. So, while Adams does appear to be having a shrinking excess levy capacity, you still have quite a bit of override capacity against your actual sort of levy ceiling and those things. So those are tools that you can work with. So approaching a deficit can really function in 2 ways. You can either propose, significant cuts. And we know building budgets year over year, you can't really cut expenses. They're bare bones as it is. There's only so much paper you can actually not buy, or a number of pens and things like that. So, when we look at budgets and we chart them out, we see primarily it's labor costs. I'd be hesitant to say you come into in a first year and start slashing budgets depending on what those needs are. Especially, when we think about the school needs, often drive a lot of these small towns. So in Williamsburg and a lot of those hill towns in the Pioneer Valley, school spending can be upwards 51, 52, 53% of operating, year over year.
Okay, and just give you a little mental rest, I'd like to ask a question, and I'd like to ask you the same question I'll ask the other applicant also. So you're a younger man, and you got a long ways ahead in your career. Mm-hmm. And if you were writing a bibliography about yourself, what would the title of it be? And when you finish your career and you retire, what would you like the last sentence of your biography to read?
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe that's harder than all the facts and figures, but...
Yeah. I don't know. The title, I guess it would be... something to the effect of, Nick's mixtape, right? Because I'll preface that because, in a world where algorithms sort of drive music consumption, much of my friends still turn to me to say, who's new, who's interesting, what bands are you listening to? And, I'll transmit those. So I guess it would be some sort of clever way to incorporate the analog nature of the things I like to do, collecting records, books, and taking pictures and sharing music amongst my friends.
Okay,
So.
that's a long title.
It is, yeah. I didn't.
Last,
Short. It was actually a short
yeah,
title.
when you first started,
Mixtape, got
but
it.
what would be your final line when you're gonna publish that book? Your last sentence.
My last sentence in a book about my life. Oh, geez.
Got a lot to live yet.
Yeah. Jeez, this is not where my head was this morning, but I mean, it'd probably be something like, I don't,
You know, that's okay. It's
Yeah.
certainly not gonna,
yeah, I mean, it would be some sort of combination of, I don't know. I would maybe say something to the effect of like, he tracked it on a spreadsheet or something like that.
sounds good, sounds good. All right, thank you, Nick. And I'm through with my question.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, Nick, thanks again for coming in this morning and applying for this position. My first question's a little shorter.
Sure.
And I promise to stay on script this time. I went off script last time. What is your vision for the town of Adams over the next 5 years, and how would you work with the select board to achieve it?
Yeah, I think this is a question that came up in the search committee, and I hate to sort of be a broken record, and we're going to borrow on those analog puns because that's just who I am. But the single most important thing that I get the sense that Adam needs is a new comprehensive plan. So I think you immediately sort of look to the office of the executive office of community development. You look for that grant funding. You make that a sort of a top priority, and you kind of begin to write those narratives. You know, you work with the town planner and the community development director. You get that application in as soon as possible. So you know they funded $149,000 comprehensive plan in the town of Williamsburg. Myself and the planning board chair, we worked. We got that grant. We submitted the RFP. We have a consultant. You know, unfortunately, state grants can produce tight timelines. But I think what's so critical about that is you can then start to have those community discussions. You can really start to get a pulse of the community, where they want to be in a few years. You can encourage people who, like the things they do for local government, whether that's volunteering for boards, being an elected member to town meeting. You can encourage them to branch out, be part of those community discussions, try to bring in more people who don't always come to those events. And then, you know, when we think of the phases of a comprehensive plan, when we're looking at like the strategy building, that's where you can work with the select board to identify persons in the community that a new town administrator just might not know in that first, few years, and say, like, who makes the most sense when we're thinking about economic development? Who makes the most sense when we're thinking about transportation, open space? You can bring those into those small groups, and you can start doing that strategic planning. And then subsequently, when you look at phase 3, right, is the final comprehensive report, and those are marked by usually a very large implementation matrix. And you go through and you assign priorities, high, low, medium to what you want to move forward. And unfortunately, a lot of times those plans that they sit on the shelf, right? You do them, you pay a lot of money, it looks great images, graphs, so forth, and then they sit there, right? So I think part of that, in that same context, you want to be quickly thinking about development of call it like Adams 2040, right? You want an implementation committee that's comprised of, at-large members plus representatives from maybe finance or planning board or some of those other key boards and committees that the town works with, who are reviewing that implementation plan and sort of working with the select board, working with the town administrator, identifying those key elements, looking for resource and trying to move that forward. So if you kind of do it, if you think of it as like a 1-2, it's going to take time to, to get the grant funding, hire a consultant, do the report, 12 to 18 months, and then you're saddled with, the implementation plan and, making sure that that's implemented and making that, as long as the select board agrees that that's a priority, you can focus a lot of your time and efforts on those things.
Follow through, very important, right?
Well, entirely, yeah. I mean, we do lots of reports and then.
All right, and the next question is a 3-part question. I'll start with the first one here. How would you support downtown revitalization and help leverage projects like the Greylock Glen to strengthen the local economy?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're not going to ask all 3 at the same time. Okay.
I can if you want. They're
I was
long.
getting ready to. No, it's all right. All right. So downtown development, and again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it is a very interesting downtown. I think it would benefit from sort of more interesting zoning aspects like form-based, focusing on sort of the built environment and emphasizing sort of pedestrian access. So, getting to the Greylock Glen is only available, I think, by car, given its location. But, in visiting and hearing director talk about sort of the vision for that. It's not totally clear what the vision is. If I'm maybe I'm misunderstood that, but you know, it's a really wonderful facility. There's an immense amount of open space, and you think about sort of how to leverage that in the totality of Adams, which has a lot of very interesting outdoor activities that can be the catalyst for sort of the multiplier to downtown, right? So like you hike Mount Greylock from Adams, you get down, you might think, well, now I'm hungry, right? So there's, you know, you'll frequent sort of local downtowns. So I think you kind of work with, you know, downtown to support and promote what you have there, you know, make it more clear, and, you know, build upon their successes and sort of support them.
And the second part, what could you add to the Greylock Glen's success and to the growth of the entire master plan?
So the Greylock Glen has its own master plan?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, and I missed
Yep.
I missed
No,
that
good.
through my survey, but how would I support the Greylock's Glen's master plan? So I think it's really about finding the resources. So I think a lot of visioning can be expensive, and you know, if the town wants to contribute that through, you know, budget appropriations, you know, you can work through that process. You know, there could be opportunities where state grants can help like further those goals, but it's, you know, it's making it a priority and sort of paying attention to it, you know, month after month, you know, year after year, and sort of taking those incremental steps, looking for those small victories, and sort of building on those successes, and then hopefully, you know, furnishing into the full, you know, vision of that, you know, facility.
And the last part of the question, how would you collaborate with local businesses, nonprofits, and regional partners?
That's a big question. So yeah, I think it's situational. You know, I don't think that town administrators sort of walk in on day one and say, we need to get that relationship going. I think you look for the opportunities in the town's work and see where there's sort of spillover and sort of where those Venn diagrams cross over. And, you know, building those relationships takes time, you know, let alone just sort of understanding what resources are like readily available. You know, I think early on in these jobs too, you know, those persons, those stakeholders will kind of avail themselves, you know, say, introduce themselves and say, you know, hi, I'm so-and-so, I've been working at here for X amount of years, we do these things. And then, you know, using that as an opportunity to sort of build on that relationship or sort of create that relationships. But those are going to take time and years, and, you know, it's not always going to be clear how to make that work, you know, effectively, you know, right out of the gate without sort of a chance to absorb and understand.
Understandable.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up. I believe strongly in comprehensive plans, and I think we need one, but with a community like Adams, a comprehensive plan can be imploded quickly, because,
Why is that?
well, I say that because we're ever changing here. Our population is declining. We're an elderly community. A lot of our young kids are moving away because they can't find the employment after, you know, going to college. And economically, we're a stressed community. We're, you know, unfortunately, our medium household money that comes in for families is below the poverty level. And with a comprehensive plan, I think money's a big part of it to move it along. I believe in them, but trying to put one together that you can foresee to 2040, it's really a comprehensive hope plan, in my opinion.
Sure.
And, you know, I think we need them, but I think we need to, you know, stabilize first before we can get a plan. I mean, I'm just gonna give an example, like Williamstown. The linchpin for Williamstown is Williams College. They're always gonna be there. And they've got plenty of money which they give out to the community. They're just giving a bunch of money for a new ambulance and fire department. So that makes the planning in communities that are fiscally sound with a real big linchpin kind of business or happening with, and Lennox is another example. So comprehensive plans are good, but sometimes they end up being a wish list. but I do believe in them. And secondly, with the Greylock Glen, I think that perhaps you may not know it, is that what's making it difficult there is that the land that things are being built on are owned by the state of Massachusetts. So you have three things that need to be accomplished. You know, privately, for us to try to build something up there, you have to, you know, go through the state because they're the landowners. So with the three things that it takes to do it, if we owned the land, I think it'd be much easier for development, because there's a lot involved when, you know, you don't own the property when you start building out. But, you know, I'd say right now, you know, we're doing a new open space plan. They don't make any land anymore, so, you know, I think we can put that together, and because, you know, economically, we're no longer a mill community, and I don't foresee
Sure.
in the near future any, you know, industry of any size because of certain things like transportation needs and so on and so forth. So those were just comments. Do you have any comments back to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are elements of the comprehensive plan recommendations that can exist in sort of code amendments or zoning amendments,
Yeah.
you know, stuff that's not prohibitively expensive. And I think the example of sort of a new fire truck or new ambulance, I mean, those are capital needs, and those are where you have to be sort of creative with your budgeting and your management, like financial management practices. So I don't know that those are necessarily all in the same, but the value of the comprehensive plan is the high level of community engagement. So if you're hearing all of those things you just said, you know, whether it's, you know, an inability to find work after high school, you know, whatever that might be, those are going to come out, but it's still not going to prevent you from sort of focusing on your strengths, you know, looking at those opportunities, you know, how to manage the growth of the community in a way that feels best to the community that's here. And, you know, that's going to be comprised of people who have been here, you know, yourself, you said you lived here your whole life, you know, as well as sort of the younger families, you know, moving in with kids. And I think those are all important voices in that process.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
My turn, Nick.
Sure.
How would you describe the ideal working relationship between a town administrator and the select board? And then how would you implement board decisions even when your professional opinion may differ? And if you can draw on your experience in Williamsburg,
Yeah, sure.
that'd be great.
So yeah, I think it's so critically important to understand what the select board's goals and priorities are, and that needs to really start at the onset. You know, identifying your expectations. You know, saying these are the things we look for. You know, one of the questions I would ask, you know, would be, you know, so how would the board characterize their relationship with the town administrator? I think that's just equally as important. And then, of course, you know, what are the metrics you look to define success with, whether that's sort of qualitative or quantitative, and and this goes back to sort of rowing in the same direction. So, you know, as an administrator, especially in a first year, I'd be hesitant to say if someone comes in and they say, well, we're going to remake the town, like that doesn't really make sense, because I don't know that you know it as well as the elected members of the select board, right? You know, as when you went through, you know, and congratulations, you know, you're in 2 years, and then down the road, it's like 14 years. I mean, there's a real big, you know, there's often a lot of institutional knowledge that you have to draw on that can be really important to helping move those goals and priorities forward. So it's really using the select board as sort of the primary policymakers in the town. And then the second part was like, when you disagree, I think that's, again, understanding, you know, at the end of the day, the administrator reports to the select board, right? And I think there can be disagreement and collaboration and finding some like Goldilocks zones a lot of times, but those relationships take time to develop, and you know that's just going to be a part of the process, right? Like year over year, month over month, and so forth. But you know, I don't know that there's been a clear example where I've been wholeheartedly disagreed with the current board I work for and say like, well, that's wildly illegal. That's never been that way. You know, I often approach some of these decision makings in a more risk adverse way, right? You know, I tend to be very cautious, and you know, I think it's that level of caution can be seen as sort of slow walking, where you know sometimes select boards like to see results, right? Like really quickly results, but there are guardrails and confines in general law that make those things. You know, we would love to just buy things and services as quick as possible, but that's not always the case, and, not to mention advertising, and so forth. But, I think at the end of the day, I don't think there's been anything I've had to move forward that I didn't not agree with to some degree. Would it have been exactly what I would have done in that position? Maybe not. But, at the end of the day, the select boards do have the community's best interest at heart, and we know that.
Thanks, Nick. So you started to talk about working with the board to identify goals and priorities. So this next question is going to talk a little bit about how
Sure.
you would get to that. So setting policy and strategic direction based on input from the town administrator, staff, legal counsel, other boards and citizens is one of the Board of Selectmen's core responsibilities.
Mhm.
The board should work with the town administrator to hold annual workshops to refocus these efforts. So based on your municipal or business experience, how would you prepare the necessary information, input, and guidance for the board's 2026 Policy and Strategic Direction Workshop?
Okay, this is the thing you do now, presently, or,
The last time we did it was 2019.
okay, so a few years out.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm a person who likes a good map, likes a good atlas. So I think one of the first things I might want to do is in individual meetings, sort of look at a map of Adams and listen to the select board sort of identify and like point out things that I may not particularly know, like these little nuances, like, oh, this little neighborhood has these characteristics that you should be aware of. But so there's an initial sort of data collection point of things where we want to just identify those data points, and then with the toolkit that I have, I think that's where we can I can take those data points, I can look at them, I can lean on sort of the building relationships, particularly with like town staff and department heads, looking at their expertise, and thinking about so where it is and where it wants to be, but that takes time, and so I think there's a collaborative effort. So hosting a workshop like that, I think would start with something to the impact of like, these are all the things I've learned and heard from, right? And these are sort of where these could go and be. But again, there's a real input process there. So it's not about showing up and directing and saying, I know better, so therefore we'll do these things.
Thanks.
Okay, the final two questions. First one is, the board should return to using subcommittees and liaisons to work with the town administrator and staff, helping ensure a well-informed and efficient Board of Selectmen. Can you share examples of subcommittees or liaisons that would both support board decision-making and help streamline the town administrator's responsibilities? And then the second question is, for instance, a capital improvement subcommittee could vet and support capital budget recommendations before they reach the board, finance committee, and town meeting.
Sure. So can you say that first part of the question? You want an example of using a subcommittee to?
Right, the board in previous years have had subcommittees liaisons to other boards. They've had subcommittees like a budget subcommittee.
Okay.
For example, like that. And we kind of.
Oh, comprised of board members?
Comprised of, well, one or two board members, but, I just want to leave that up to you, what your thoughts could be with that. But we've kind of gotten away from that. We need to get back to that.
Sure, interesting. Yeah, so I think the most salient example is the way we do sort of budgeting in the town of Williamsburg. So the operating budget lives in the administrator's office. We'll take in all those initial requests from department heads. We'll do all those 2.5 calculations. We'll communicate that information as people are thinking about what their needs are for the next fiscal year. And then we'll create a comprehensive spreadsheet that lists out the 145 line items that make up the Williamsburg budget. And then we'll make it sort of dynamic. So when we bring those to finance committee, as they sort of talk through and think about those things, you can see your sort of like, oh, what if we increase the fire department by 5,000%? What does that look like, right? Okay. But your question about sort of acting as a liaison. So in Williamsburg, we were often meeting, particularly with the finance committee. It was off weeks from the select board, so it was beholden on me to sort of bring those conversations between the finance to the select board, back to finance, and we would do that cycle for 4 or 5 months and things like that. I mean, I think it's an interesting element in terms of, having select board membership attend those meetings. But there's some, it requires like a sustained effort in that process, and, knowing that you're going to attend planning board meetings for all of fiscal 27, you attend a lot of night meetings as it is, so it is a big ask. It is it can be a heavy responsibility. So I think that it's pretty close to answering your question, but I think you're wanting to get back to that model. Is that my understanding?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I think those are opportunities too, where if members of the select board have particular interests, like maybe zoning is like the thing you love the most, or maybe open space is the thing you're so, near and dear, those can be opportunities to build on interest and help sort of, be a part of those discussions.
Can I ask a follow-up, just to better understand how Williamsburg is structured? Can you talk about maybe the different boards or commissions that Williamsburg has, and any, like, working relationship that you have with some of those independent boards and commissions?
Yeah. So I'll jump to the ones that are generally the most active. I think of like the planning board. We have a very active energy committee. The finance committee is elected and serves very important roles. So I meet with the finance committee the entirety of the budget cycle. So I provide that sort of professional support to those. And then thinking of sort of some of the advisory committees like energy, it's comprised of a very interesting group of people who have these like big visions. So the administrator's office can help sort of further their goals. Largely what they do is like they might identify some grant opportunities, and it'll come to our office to sort of fill in any of the gaps, get that submitted, work with state contracting to get those thoughts and like bring those to fruition. And, again, it goes back to that open door policy. Chairs will walk in, I'm responsive by email, by phone, all of those things. So like that's just part of doing business, and I think it just takes time and commitment to doing those things. Yeah.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
All right, the last question is, as you've read the charter, you can see that the town administrator for the town of Adams runs the day-to-day, oversees all the employees as supervisor. As the chief administration officer, you oversee the day-to-day operations of the town departments and staff. How do you build a strong, accountable, and motivated team, is the first question. And what is your approach to evaluating department performance, supporting professional development, and fostering a positive workplace culture?
Right, yeah, so through my time as, city council and working in administration, I think I have a really strong understanding of what day-to-day operations look like in departments. I'm not saying I know everything, but I have a pretty clear sense of, how the patterns and rhythms of a fiscal year sort of unfold for departments. So I think that's really helpful in setting sort of like the baseline expectations. We know we've got to set the tax rate before December, 31st. We know collections are going to come in quarterly. We know we have to reconcile between the treasurer and the accountant. And, knowing all of those pieces, I think can be really helpful to just sort of keeping an eye on the schedule and using that as an opportunity to keep people working towards their department's sort of vision. So I know that, and I think that is built over time by, again, the open door policy, coming in, asking questions that, no matter what they are, you take the time to answer and kind of talk through those, whether that's like thinking about grant applications or some like hyper-specific MGL considerations, or even the idea I think a lot of times we do is thinking of like alternatives or scenario planning. So if this happens, we need to account for this. And I think those are just skills you learn being in the field for as long as I have, and I think I can develop those and hone those. And I think, obviously it does differ considerably from the present relationship or the present organizational chart I have in Williamsburg, but I'm not shying away from that opportunity to, work with department heads, making sure that they have the resources they need to do the job that they've been hired to do, and that they're accountable, to specifically the highly scheduled things that we know. There are just some squishier things like snow and ice removal that you can't quite always predict, but we try to make sure that we're prepared and able to, we know it's going to snow, but how much and how often, and what's the ice precipitation look like? And, a lot of those can be aided with resource. And I also think too, being reflective is a tenet of mine, right? So like we know mistakes happen, and it's not always because you purposely meant to do that, but acknowledging those and thinking about what you can do better is really helpful. I think a lot of what we do, outside of some things, it's always going to be there the next day, and we can work to sort of correct those things.
Just as a follow-up, as you went through your tour, the town of Adams has several departments, and they're not located right here under this roof.
Sure, yeah.
Correct? And you have several employees that work at those departments. And you also have a lot going on here. You have different departments just internally to this building. You have the two separate floors. My question is, and you indicated before, I think, that, you would meet with the department heads, discuss with them. But what about the actual, you're responsible for many, many employees here. So what are your thoughts on communication to employees at the working level, right, doing their job every day? And some would like more communication than others, but, and you mentioned the open door policy, but that, you can have it open, but are they gonna come in? How do they feel comfortable?
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on how you possibly could handle and reach out to communicate to all employees? We need to become one team here. And sometimes that is not felt here, right?
Okay.
Because you have different buildings and different whatever. So we need to come together as a team of employees. So what are your thoughts on how you could help and start that structure?
Yeah, as you indicated, I think departments may feel differently about that question. So I think it's beholden on the administrator to have those initial meetings and get a sense of, well, what departments want out of the administrator position, or what do they need? I mean, those are two very different things, but it's important to set those expectations early on so you can kind of work towards to meeting those. And then those relationships, I think, will grow over time. And I mean, the easiest one way if you're talking about clear communication across everyone, am I assuming everyone has an email address to adams.org? Yeah. So, I mean, you can use that as an opportunity to sort of, particularly like post, select board meetings, as sort of policies and things are changing, using that as an opportunity to communicate. But, figure out what's best for each department. So I don't think that the highway communication might be the same as the police department's communication. And, I think you start with those, looking down or not looking down, but like cascading down, right? So if it starts with the chief and the administrator, and how does it best to get across that information to officers, what makes the most sense, and consequently, to the highway department too. So those are different locations, making time to try to go there, be a part of those things as needed and welcome. We know the highway departments are often in the field, most of the day. So, if I show up and no one's there, it doesn't really serve a purpose. But you can, I think, develop those relationships over time. But it's really going to be contingent on like what their expectations are and what their needs are for the administrator's office.
Okay, any final follow-up questions from the board? Okay.
I have one.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. So Nicholas, one thing that stood out in your resume compared to some of the other candidates was the fact that you have a master's degree in both public policy and administration and regional planning. Can you kind of describe how that would be beneficial for us as a town, having the master's versus a bachelor's, and can you describe how that would help you in your role here?
Yeah, so I think so that is a dual program that the university offers. So just a little context: when you enroll in the public policy and administration program, you have to concentrate on some element, whether that's like environmental or transportation or something like that. But they also offer sort of the additional like third year with regional planning, public health, and like one or two other departments, right? So like, why is that beneficial? So I think those programs are really well designed, and they provide students with a really deep toolkit of methods and tools to help look at policy making and decision making. And I think, when I look at the courses I've taken over that time, whether it's like GIS, economics, statistics, policy analysis, like they all play an important role in understanding like what makes sense for the government to be bringing back to its community. So I think that just, something like that coupled with the field experience I have I think could be a good fit for any community, right? It's just, you have all these opportunities to work with that. We know that I may have all that toolkit, but at the end of the day, no matter how often I try to set a to-do list for the day, by 8:05, that's sort of out the window a lot of the time. So we have to be responsive, we have to be, flexible, we have to be creative, but we can still do it foundationally through those principles, through those methods that, do spill over. And I think just provide me a very clear understanding of the bigger picture, the bigger outlook. And, what I would say is I have all these skills. I'm still in a growing part of my career, and I've not quite found my stride. And when I do, that community and myself working together are going to see some really interesting results.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, now, what questions do you have for the board? And any board member can respond to your questions.
Yeah, sure. So how would the board, characterize their relationship with the town administrator?
Anyone?
Well, I have to say, I'm the outlier on this board, and I don't apologize for it, but I've been with, 3 different town administrators, and and I won't mention names because that's not the right thing to do, but I believe that I felt comfortable with just one of them, going to see them, and I stop up when I think something's important to get to them, but I want to get to a point, because I'm only gonna stay 2 more years. I have 2 more years left on my 3-year term, and I want to make a difference, and I don't feel I'm making a difference, and I don't want my 15 years, should my life continue that long, to be meaningless. And I think things need to change really in this community financially, and the next town administrator is going to need to make some tough decisions, and the person that I felt comfortable with was a person that would make decisions that didn't make people happy, because I think what happens in town government is there becomes a good guy kind of, everybody get together and everything's gonna be good. But it's good for the people in the employ of the town, but sometimes you don't see beyond the windows of your office to see what's happening to other people. And we know for a fact that the economy is starting to tank a little bit, and that's gonna make it necessary to make some tough decisions, and that's what I'm looking for. So my talk, I'll just end with, if I feel comfortable with somebody that I know is up front with me, I'll go see them. But I haven't felt that with some town administrators, so I'll just put it that way, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm certainly not a ghost in a town hall, but I'm not up in the office every day, and I don't think that's the type of person that I am.
Nick, similar to how you approached your city council position that you talked about when we first started the interview, and making sure that you understood the departments, and going into City Hall to be apprised of the issues before they came before you at a council meeting. That's how I've approached this position. I have set up regular meetings with the town administrator, just to, know what's going on. I also stated some of the statewide and regional committees that I have served on, and bringing that information back to the town administrator, I feel has been a valuable resource, so that information can then be disseminated as needed. So I've always looked at it as a partnership with the town administrator. Will we always agree? No, I don't always want to agree.
Sure.
I find that there's a good product that can come out of a healthy conversation based on fact. And so that's how I would be looking at it, but I would also be looking at this next town administrator, similar to John's questions there at the end about bringing folks together as a team, and reflecting on the question I asked you earlier about that policy and priority workshop for the board, right? Like, how can this next town administrator get us all working together in a respectful manner so that we can see progress here in the town of Adams?
Okay, anyone else? Jeff?
Oh.
You good?
I haven't worked with a full-time town administrator yet. We've only
Okay,
had
sure.
interim since
Yeah.
I've been on the board.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I don't have a lot of insight there,
Yeah.
but I think to touch on some of Christine's points, I think one thing that we're really looking for is some stability in the position and some stability here at Town Hall to make sure everyone's on the same page. Our interims have done a great job with the resources that they have, but it has been chaotic with a lot of turnover in the past few months. So I think what's really important is taking a look at a lot of these positions here and just adding a little bit of stability to the nature of what Town Hall can be and is.
I worked a short time with one previous town administrator. What I'm looking forward is someone that is there, so to be talked to, so I have visibility downtown. People have known me all my life. I do a lot of volunteer work. They come to me with issues. I want someone I can go to and say, hey, let's, discuss this and that. And I just think it's important that you feel confident in that person and that he or she, well, in this case it'll be a he, is very transparent in all the dealings, that he comes to the board and expresses what he thinks, whether we agree or not agree, but I like transparency. And in that, I've asked this question to the previous candidate, are you willing to relocate to Adams for your position?
Yeah, so I have flexibility in my current living situation. I rent a small apartment filled with books and records, so I'm not opposed to the idea. I just need to make sure it makes sense. Again, but I haven't been offered the job, so I don't know.
I know, I totally understand that. I
but
was just
at the end of the day, I do have flexibility in my living situation, so I'm not.
not opposed to it.
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have to say.
And many things have been covered. We do have the Great Lac Glen as our economic development project, and we have the downtown, we have the theater as a kind of cornerstone to help build and stores and open new restaurants and things like that. But things take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing on my mind has been housing in our community, which is one of the state's priorities. And we have taken a old building that the town owned and converted it into apartments on 20 East Street. You don't need to know where that is.
Yeah, it's the old middle school there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're very close to opening. They have, I think, 9 apartments, brand new, and they're all leased out already, right? So very quickly, moderate income with good jobs. And as we mentioned, we have a low per capita income here. What do you do about that? You start providing a place to live with, it's a great place to raise a family and, quality of life. And I just think all that needs to be marketed. And we have our next project is the middle school, which is going to be 30-plus apartments over there, again, bringing in more income to the downtown and helping us grow there. So, we have issues. We can sit here and talk about them. We can do something about them, right? So I look at the bigger vision, and I'd like to see what's, with the plans that you're proposing, would be great that we all work together and regenerate the vision for the future. And we need to do that. And the last 8 months have been part-time town administrators who've done a fantastic job for us, but it's hard to do 2 jobs at once, and never mind just the town administrator.
Yeah,
So,
I get that.
So I look at the bigger vision sometimes. I've been here for 14 years. I'm looking at what's coming up for the future and the next generation of the town of Adams. Next question.
Yeah, does the board have any particular qualitative or quantitative metrics they might use to identify the success of the town administrator?
Man, you're speaking to my mind. I tell you.
That's,
I was at General Dynamics. That's what we went by. We went by measurements to determine how we're doing and future predictions and scheduling and things like that. We have talked about that in the past, but really the board and has not been provided, and it's because of the amount of work that everybody has to do. You know, the staff is very tight, and they get done what's required, and they go beyond. But these extra type projects, to institute that type of metric system, to see, you know, such a baseline, and see how we're doing over time based on our goals. We don't have that, and I'm glad you asked the question, because hopefully the town administrator will have that kind of a attitude and direction to, as we set the goals and vision early next year, to set those baselines. And over time, report back to the Board of Selectmen, is it every 6 months, every year, on how we're doing, going back to those goals. So definitely in favor of that, and we need to have more of that here.
So in 2019, that workshop that we had, we did do that work.
Yeah.
That informed a spreadsheet that had 5 goals listed on it with some measurable
Oh.
items. And then, 2020 came,
Sure, things
stayed.
changed.
Yeah. But it was a document that was used by the previous town administrator as that first goal setting. And why I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, next.
Yeah, so I just, how does the select board deliver feedback to the administrator? Is that something that happens regularly, or, do you have any particular methods that you lean on?
Okay, that's probably different for each person, so, anybody?
I've done it as things have come up. Because I'm not afraid to come into the office and tell you how I feel.
Sure.
Once again, new to the position, but
Understood.
through email and then just in person. I mean, I think having that open door policy that you mentioned was really important. Not just for the Board of Selectmen, but also for department heads or other people in the community. But what I'm looking for in a town administrator is someone I can regularly engage with. I want to be informed of what's going on, be able to get the correct opinions, legal advice, whatever it may take. But I think for the Board of Selectmen, being the most informed that we can possibly be will produce the best results in our decisions. So I look forward to whoever it is that I'm working with next to have a good working relationship.
And I've lived in Adams my whole life, and I know a lot of people, other than when I went away to graduate school. That's the only time I've left Adams. And people know me, and they'll call me a lot. I don't even have a website with the town of Adams. I have a website, of course, and when somebody calls me, after 13 years, I've never stopped going back to that person until the situation was rectified, whether it was positively rectified or it couldn't be done. And because when people call me, they call me because they know that I'm going to go out and try to get, things done for them. And if a person calls me, that problem's bothering them. They wouldn't call me and say, "Oh, Joe, it's a beautiful town, everything is going great." So I think my best qualities is to make sure I get back to people that call me, and I won't let them down. I never have after 13 years. They might not like what the conclusion was, but I'm a people person. I feel a lot better. I don't have to get accolades from, getting awards or anything. I like to stay behind the scenes because I can be better that way as an individual rather than trying to boost myself up who I am, because I'm nobody. I'm just a common person like everybody walking up and down the street. And I've been that way my whole life. People that know me realize that. And volunteerism has been a big part of my life ever since I've been a young man. And I'm going to continue that to my grave.
Okay. Ann, anything?
I think Jay pretty much said the same things I would have said to you. And like I said, I'm a downtown person. I know a lot of people, and I have come to previous TA and talked to some of the problems that were there, and I'm looking forward to whoever is going to be in the office next, is they're open to when I have someone's problem that I want to talk to, that I can go to them and they'll help me out or send me what direction I should go for them. So that's it.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know what time we have left, so
we've got a little time.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think the last one is like, is there any sort of undefined or certain characteristics that the select board's looking for in their next hire
Characteristics
of the person?
of the person?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll say, and I said it to the last person, I like a person that's gonna go out and walk the street, and, because I found over the years that the common folk know just as much or more about what's going on in the town, but they don't know how to voice it. And some of the best ideas will come from those people, because they're realistic thinkers. They don't look at, well, we're gonna have to, in 10 years, this will be, you know, the way it's gonna be. So that's how I've learned a lot in this community before I was even a selectman, because you have to have the communication skill, and you need to get to that communication skill with the people that you're dealing with. Because some person isn't gonna wanna know no algebra 2 questions to, figure what they want out. So you have to get down to them, and you have to give them some reassurance that you're going to do what it takes to help them. And if you stay in your office too much and just look out the window as people walk by, you're missing a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo Joe's words there. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for is a good communicator. The Northern Berkshire community, I might get in trouble for saying this, it's a very loyal community, but also can be a very stubborn community as well. And I think it's really important that people are informed about what's actually happening, number one, in town hall, but also with the decisions and why the decisions are being made. So being able to explain and communicate to us, to the public, to the department heads, what are the rationales behind decisions, I think is gonna be one of the most important things going forward.
So, two things. One, I'll mirror a little bit what Jay and Joe just said about communication. And I'll put it in the context that we have a couple of plans that have been, they've been completed in the last several years. One of which is going to, is about sewer user fee. And then, a general government review. Now, I'm missing the third one, but we also talked about the open space plan, right? So there are all these plans that have come together that are gonna inform some policy, and there's going to be maybe some difficult conversations that have to take place. So what I'm looking for is a person who can communicate, what has been studied and what the recommendations are, and educate, this board, the residents, other boards, committees, staff, et cetera, on what those issues are and how we're gonna move forward. And so that piece is the communication, which is a little bit more on the education side. And then, I've lost my train of thought. That's what happens to me nowadays, but there was a second item.
We can come back to that.
Yeah, don't come back to it, it's fine. The communication piece could be
Sure.
out the window.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just thinking, a good communicator, open to suggestions and arguments, and being able to be on the, whether it's the two different sides, how do you get the two different sides together? I think that's part of what Christine is talking about. But definitely, it's, again, that transparency, so everyone, whether it's the select board, the people in the building, but mostly the citizens of the town, know what is going on. I think that's very important with our new administrator.
And staying with communication, I wouldn't want to walk around, and sometimes I do, and just ask a general question of, when's the last time you spoke with the town administrator, and you get a response of 6 months or a year, maybe not since they started. That's not something that I want to hear. So, again, getting back to all the employees, all one team, need to communicate to, at least everyone needs to know you, needs to have spoken with you. It's when you, with the person over time, so. And also, in the public, willing to go to the Council on Aging, willing to go to the Lions Club and other clubs in our community, willing to go to a citizens group. and go over what the vision is with the select board members, whoever wants to be there. Go over the goals, go over, explain to the public what we plan on doing. Because we have our meetings, we have so much time, we do the town's business, right? But we need to have more communication with the public. It would be nice to go to where they are, I think it's been mentioned, and explain everything and answer questions throughout the year instead of everything coming together at budget time or something like that. We need to be better communicators to the community and also communicating with our state representative and our state senator and with other government officials from the state. We need to get out of the office sometimes and make connections because this is your full-time job. So that also needs to happen more often. So communication.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
John, thanks for that second piece, because that was my second thought, was the regional approach.
Yeah.
And making sure that you are developing those relationships outside of Adams and not just insular here in Adams.
Sure. All right, thanks.
Are you good with questions?
Yeah, I'm all set.
The board's good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to ask if you wouldn't mind, do you have closing remarks you'd like to make? Or?
I could do one, sure.
Okay, so if you don't mind standing up and facing the camera in the audience, which they've seen the back of you for most of this last hour.
All right.
You can stand up and just, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts about
Yeah,
this
the
position?
camera's over there, as you
Sure.
well know, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot, but you'll be doing, if you, this position, this is a lot of what they do, a lot of public communication and.
No, I don't disagree. That's good to see everyone. Yeah, so I think this came out in the interview with the search committee. So if you know nothing about me, one of my hobbies is sort of endurance training, mostly in the form of like road running, long distance running, marathoning, and so forth. And as part of that process, I keep this spreadsheet, and it's daily. Starts January 1 and runs to December 31st. And when you look at the spreadsheet, there's the mileage and the time and the location and the shoes and all the little metrics that go into those things. And we know that when we're doing things over time with consistency and sort of a sustained effort towards those goals, some days don't look great, right? You get back after the 5K and you think, wow, that was hard. But when you look at the totality of it over the course of the year, you start to see those gains and you start to see those improvements and where things sort of worked right, what didn't work right, and how you make adjustments on the next spreadsheet. And that's what I bring to these positions is that level of endurance, the day in and day out. We know Monday is not going to look the same as Wednesday, and everything's going to change in between them. So there's going to be good days and bad days, and we focus on what works well, how do we make improvements, and we be reflective and hopefully sort of approach decision-making that furthers the bigger vision, the broader goal, and thinking in the whole context of things. I guess that would be about as close as closing statement you're gonna get. So, yeah, I appreciate the time.
All right, we'll take a 15-minute recess before interviewing our final individual.